This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Tholahungva. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. The Interior Department says part of the Missouri River is owned by the Mandan Hidatsa Arikara Nation. This reverses a Trump administration ruling that favored claims by the state of North Dakota instead. That ruling overturned decades of precedents. At the same time, the MHA Nation is continuing to press a legal claim to resolve the matter in federal courts. MHA says the stakes are high. The nation could collect more than $200 million in oil and gas royalties, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars involving the value of the riverbed, now covered by the sprawling Lake Sakakawea, plus future royalties. Chairman Mark Fox asked North Dakota to, quote, respect and accept the Interior Department's decision. A school board in Colorado Springs, Colorado is retiring its Indian mascot. The Cheyenne Mountain School District voted 4-1 to make the change. In its resolution, the school board cited several groups, such as the National Congress of American Indians, the American Counseling Association, and the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, which have all called for the removal of such mascots. The Civil Rights Commission says the use of Native American images and team names by non-Native schools, quote, mocks and trivializes Native American culture and has the potential to create racially hostile environments. The board ended its resolution saying the mascot has been a controversial issue in the school community and it wants to establish a new team name and mascot that will unite the school community. The high school mascot will be removed by the end of this school year. Part of the resolution also asks for a new team name and mascot to be recommended to the board. The Herd Museum in Phoenix is now sending out its traveling exhibit called Away from Home, American Indian Boarding School Stories. One of the first stops will be at the Heritage Museum of the Clatsop County Historical Society in Astoria, Oregon. The exhibit is designed to tell the story of the federal policy that removed Native children from their homes and tribes and forced them to attend boarding schools. What became known as the boarding school era started in the 1870s. Through the decades, the schools changed and some closed. Today, a few boarding schools remain open. The exhibit will be open to the public on April 6th with social distancing protocols. Top surfers and police in Australia are joining a school initiative that creates a classroom in the water. It combines surfing lessons with Indigenous culture. The program was first developed to help Noongar youngsters learn more about their ancestry. Now it's also helping them build relationships outside of the classroom. It's not just about riding the waves, it's about culture. The Wadandi Surf Program in Australia combines surfing with Indigenous culture. Lakai Weston is one of the students.
Learning about culture, learning how to surf, and yeah.
They're not just learning about surfing, they're learning about culture, they're learning about who they are as people, and that really shows in their nature as well. To be starting off quiet as quiet young students to really getting out there and asking questions and passing on that knowledge at school as well has been the biggest thing that I've seen in growth with them.
Local police and pro surfers have also signed up for the class. Surfers are sharing pointers on how to improve in the sport while also learning about the rich Indigenous history right at their fingertips. Pro surfer Taj Burrow is glad to be a part of the class.
It's a shame that it's not in the standard education curriculum because it's truly incredibly important to have that connection to country.
For police officers, it's a chance to form bonds with Noongar kids.
I think they initially were probably a little bit not as receptive as and we anticipated that. We thought that was, when we got out the police car, got de-kitted and into our wetsuits and paddled out with them, I think it was, for them, one, a bit of a laugh, and two, I think they actually thought it was pretty cool that we could come out and do that.
Embedding this in our sport and making it something that we're really proud of moving forward. We don't want it to be a drop in the ocean, we want it to be a wave of change that sweeps right across the country.
The program is set to be expanded into state schools later this year. The highly popular kids show, The Casagrandes on Nickelodeon, is introducing a Lakota character.
I'm Charles Littlebull.
Charles Littlebull is a new character having a big impact on young audiences. The character is a Native American graduate student who loves to tutor kids. Little Bull is one of the first Lakota characters to be featured in a national animated TV show. And as the country examines racial stereotypes, positive Native American characters are beginning to emerge. Robbie Diamond, a Native actor, is the voice of Little Bull. You can check your local listings to find Charles on new episodes of the Casa Grandes. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalahungva. When we come back, college students and the pandemic. Mark, how are the students doing?
Hi, Patty. Students have some challenges. The answer is a new study showing they're having a hard time. We'll talk to a psychologist about some ways to cope when we come back. Tribal college students are struggling. A new study by the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, also known as AIHEC, surveyed 500 returning students. The pandemic and distance learning has made classes more difficult. 60% say that life at home has made studying particularly tough. Joining us today to break this down is Darryl Tonemah. He has a Ph.D. in counseling psychology and cultural studies. Welcome, Darryl.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the pandemic has been hard on all of us, but Native students are compounded by a lot of issues.
Yeah, there's during COVID season, one of the initial concerns was the duration of it, because chronic stress can have similar effects as acute stress, acute moments, a car accident, an abuse, a natural disaster. Chronic stress over time can have some of the very similar physical, psychological effects as those. And for the students that you're referring to, if they're in homes or environments that previously were very stressful, it doesn't, just because they got older, didn't make them immune to those stresses. And then adding the stress of college studies, it can create a toxicity for our young people.
How important is it to have socialization when folks are remote?
That's a really good question, and probably the exact right question, because we as humans, we're social beings. We thrive in community, and we suffer in silos. So creating senses of community are so important, particularly I would say for Native people, because we are very family-based, we're clan-based, we're tribal-based, we're res-based. So we have all these levels of community. And then, unfortunately, with all the deaths that have occurred during COVID, we haven't been able to mourn as communities. So these levels of hurt and stress and anxiety and pain, honestly, have really stacked up over time. And it's going to show up somewhere. We're just not void of it. So when I was on about a year ago, when one of my initial concerns was what's going to change over time as COVID extends longer. What's going to change in us, and how is that going to be reflected in community, the levels of disparate rates of alcoholism, drugs, suicidality. And we're starting to see higher levels of those now. I've been working several communities that are seeing spikes in suicidal behavior, suicide ideation, and it kind of trickles down to how were we prepared for something like this. And if you look at those numbers from the study that you referenced, previous to COVID, needs were being met, food needs, fresh water, those kind of things were being met, but mental behavioral health needs were still pretty low even before COVID. So adding COVID into a population that wasn't thriving in that area to begin with only made the results seem stronger or more negative now.
and I know this is a long way off, but could COVID be the wake-up call to say mental health is a priority and we need to take account of it?
Yes, I think so. There are part of the work that I get to do is telepsychology, and pairing technology to stand in the gap of what's occurring right now socioculturally has been significant. I get to meet with people in their homes where previously maybe people weren't comfortable going to the clinic because they knew people who worked there, or the stigma of behavioral health. And really the stigma of behavioral health is just out the window now. I think there's been enough social marketing and education that there are many people who are struggling during COVID season, and it's okay to ask for help to get over a hump. And technology is a way to do that. I've met with folks in their homes. I've met with people in their cars because there were so many people in their homes that they would take their phone to their car and we'd meet in the car. So I think decreasing the stigma and increasing access to care is going to be the new season for behavioral health. And that's significant for us.
Does this mean we need to increase the number of professionals in the mental health field?
Yes, with increased demand, there can be a shortage. I know that we have trouble with psychiatry, finding enough psychiatry for folks that are asking for requiring medications. There's on our team, we have master's level, we have Ph.D. level, we have psychiatry, we have traditional counselors. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be what we would consider Western counseling. I think traditional counselors have an amazing spot for our communities right now as well.
You mentioned technology, and that's actually one of the bright spots of the study. And I was actually thinking of a student I know that's trying to navigate some really complicated classes on a little Chromebook. But technology is a real issue for tribal people.
Yeah, there's technology. There's connectivity problems, rather. Not universally, but there have been connectivity problems affording the technology that's going to support what needs to be done in a classroom setting. So there are barriers. I don't think they're insurmountable barriers, but I think as communities, it's requiring us to be creative to stand in that gap to solve that problem. And also I want to mention, it's not just students who are struggling and suffering during this time. I speak with a lot of teachers, superintendents, educators, physicians, psychologists who are struggling as well. We're not immune to the effects of COVID. Particularly in education, the teachers it's harder to connect. It's harder to, not just through technology, but it's harder to have a sense for their students. It's harder to engage the students. And so they feel many feel there's a gap there, and it's affecting their capacity to teach and the students' capacities to learn, and yet being held accountable to the same rigors of testing and things. So it's a very stressful season for all around. And I think part of maintaining wellness is giving ourselves a break in that. And really, it's such a cliche, but it's true. Right now, just really doing just the best we can do with the capacities we have, with the technology that we have, and know that there's going to be hiccups, and leaning on each other and creating the senses of community, healing communities that we can during this season.
What are some of the best practices out there for parents, for community leaders, teachers, really everybody?
One of the things I talk with parents about is during COVID season, it's critical that parenting isn't a spectator sport. We really have to dive in to the states, the lives of our children, because they are borrowing the safety of the parents. They're social referencing. They're looking to the parent and saying, or the adult teacher saying, how do I behave? Who can I be in this moment? Do I constrict? Do I shut down? Do I stress? Or do I lean into it? Do I thrive? And really all that is about the self-care of the adult, the educator, and that trickles down to our children. And helping the kids have sovereign moments for themselves, where maybe previously they would have felt out of control in their own bodies or in their own thoughts, but letting them know that you are present, attuned, and that helps them feel a sense of peace, a sense of calm in a stressful time.
You know, right now there's so much pent up wanting to get out and do things and wanting to relax. How do you convey the balance between doing that and safety and mental health?
Yeah, well, coming from New York back to Arizona, it's a whole different world. New York is still pretty shut down. I think it's a level of vigilance, being aware that where you are, how you're protecting yourself in public spaces, but not having it be the moment that sits under your thumb that you're just pushing super hard. I think we're to a season now where it doesn't have to be hypervigilance. It's just vigilance. It's just taking care of yourself, taking care of your family. Mask up when you go into public spaces, and in our communities, making sure that we're all taken care of, making sure that our elders are taken care of. I think keeping a healthy balance with vigilance is a healthy approach.
In some of the vaccine studies, there was a lot of recognition by tribal communities that they want to do something for elders and they want to reach out and help others by taking the vaccine. How does that factor into mental health issues in terms of reaching out to others?
Yeah, I think the being social and I think reaching out to others and helping, keeping the elders safe helps both sides. It helps the elders because obviously we don't want them getting sick, but it helps us because we feel proactive in a time where maybe we don't feel as proactive or as autonomous as we'd like to. So it's an opportunity for us to say, here's where I'm making this stand. Here's how I'm taking care of myself, which takes care of others. That's a level of proactivity that maybe we haven't been able to see in the last year.
Thank you so much, Darryl Tonemah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we'll be right back. Turn on cable news and you'll hear the back and forth discussions about government and public policy. Often there's something missing: Native voices. It's not that there are no Native Americans on national public affairs television. There are. Once in a great while, it's a journalist. More often, it's what networks call an activist. But what's always missing is the voice of a Native expert who works in the public arena. We hear from lots of experts, just not ours. A couple of years ago on election night, we set out to change that. We asked Holly Cook Macarro to unpack what happens when candidates win elections to office. What are the steps taken to actually take office? We learned a lot that night, and over the next couple of years, we've had Holly come back often to explain how the mechanics of Washington work. We now have the voice of an expert, something missing from television. We're going to experiment with this a bit more. We plan on hearing from Holly every other Wednesday and add to that a conservative voice, John Teshuda III, to add his perspective. Now back to Holly. Welcome, Holly.
Good afternoon, Mark. How are you?
Good. You may be the first person to work Ojibwe into a Washington Post piece. Maybe tell us about that.
Yes, that was a unique opportunity. The Washington Post asked me for some comments and on the reaction, my reaction to Secretary Holland's confirmation. And as I was responding, I thought of what that means. Like, I articulated to him that having worked in the White House, I understood the echelon that cabinet members inhabit and how I was still getting my head around that, and just the enormity of having Secretary Deb Haaland, a Native person, at the very highest level of the government. And it came to her, leader in our language, Ogama, and Akwe. So Gitche Ogama Akwe, the highest leader woman, seemed like an appropriate description for Secretary Haaland as I was thinking about and responding to the Washington Post. So it was a unique opportunity to get a little bit of what we call Ojibwe, that's our Ojibwe language, into the Washington Post.
Excellent. I can imagine the copy desk trying to check that one.
Yes.
Maybe tell us about, now that Secretary Haaland's in office, how the first few days have gone and what kind of pressure she's under to meet with everybody, probably.
Yes, I think we saw something remarkable on day one that Indian Country Today participated in, which was the meeting with Indigenous journalists. And that was extraordinary. We are usually an afterthought. And again, I think that's the kind of priority and access and inclusion. I wouldn't say priority and access over other communities, but an inclusion that we're not an afterthought. So I thought that was terrific, and seeing that coverage. And as she has moved through the week, she's tackling some of the big issues that have been bubbling up as she went through the confirmation process with the listening session on the federal oil and gas program. She had a terrific announcement about the recovery, one of conservation's biggest recovery stories of the bald eagle, or Migizi, as we say in Ojibwe. And her meetings, I think, will turn towards the implementation of the American Rescue Plan, given the extraordinary amount of resources that are going to Interior through the American Rescue Plan.
And that means a lot of meetings with tribal governments about how this is all going to work.
Yes, and I think a lot of those meetings will also be with the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Brian Newland. He is the top person down in the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs hallway. And as usual, that is where tribal leaders usually start. But it is very important, and I raised this previously, as the formula distribution is being put together and all of these consultations. There are so many consultations going on right now, multiple consultations a day with the different agencies. But Secretary Haaland will now be across the table from Secretary Yellen. And that equivalency in terms of having a voice in determining how these funds, and most particular that tribal leaders and tribal governments are most involved in the decision-making part of, is that $20 billion going, the recovery funds going to tribal governments. So her voice there will be very critical in partnership with Secretary Yellen. And I think another indication of the kind of priority that the Biden-Harris administration is putting on its relationship with Indian Country is the fact that Secretary Yellen joined the tax advisory, the Tribal Treasury Tax Advisory meeting earlier this week, which is a surprise to everyone in attendance. But again, I thought a terrific indication that she is paying attention. She knows this is important to Indian Country. There was a second consultation over the distribution, the potential distribution as a result of any decision, favorable decision in the Shawnee case, hearkening back to those tribes who were listed as zero and received the minimum amount of funding in that first distribution of the CARES Act. So all of those things, having the Secretary's voice as a part of that and an informed voice from the get-go, yes, I think those meetings in partnership with Treasury, those will be taking up much of the Secretary's time.
And we have other agencies still to have appointments announced that probably will impact Indian Country as well. Have you heard any inklings about what's coming in that direction?
At interior or
Beyond
at the other
interior. Beyond
departments?
interior.
All at interior. I think that the Biden-Harris administration made a pretty strong statement by putting Brian Newland in as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary. He was there a few weeks before Secretary Holland was confirmed. The secretary is usually given the deference to have a say in who is nominated as the Assistant Secretary, but certainly they have someone in there now who is familiar with the department, is an experienced hand, and as a former tribal chairman of his own tribe at Bay Mills in Michigan, has that critical outside-in perspective as well that I know many tribal leaders in Indian country are view as an asset.
Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. We'll be back with another edition tomorrow. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
Indian Country Today is produced at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
This is Indian Country Today.